Hello and welcome to session 267 in the AIsafety.com reading group. Tonight we will be discussing the second half of Katja Grace's article, Let's Think About Slowing Down AI. Katja Grace is still the lead researcher at AI Impacts, and one of the things that I felt a bit bad about last time was that I always have a very skeptical outlook on the articles and try to nitpick and find any kinds of complaints I can see. And in particular, last time I felt that some of my criticism was too harsh, and I want to stress a bit more that I think this is really great work. Also, on a bit more personal note, I was in San Francisco and met Katja last week and talked with her, and I said, we're doing this reading group, and she immediately asked what do people in the reading group say that she can do better, like what are the weak points. And I think this kind of curiosity about her work and humility, I think that was really inspiring, and also she seemed generally like a really nice person. So props for that. Also, immediately afterwards, I spoke with someone from Anthropic who had put 50% probability on AI risk and was working on AI capability in Anthropic. So, there's a big contrast between Katja Grace and many of the other people that you meet in California. So the first area that we're going to look at tonight is being friends with risk takers. And the first question Katja Grace raises is the AI safety community, the people working in AI, are we cooperating with the AGI labs? How much are we friends with them? And she has a quote by Steve Burns, trying to slow down research to AGI would make AI researchers see us as their enemies. And one from Eliezer Yudkowsky, I didn't connect AGI risk with AI labs to avoid alienating them. So that seems like evidence that people are trying to be friendly and cooperative. I looked into these quotes a bit more, and I think the context in fact changes dramatically if you read some more. Then here is the next tweet from Eliezer, and here he says that it's not friendship and cooperative, but he's motivated by fear of what OpenAI could do. So I think a case can be made that it's not that the AI safety community is cooperative or friendly with them, we're just afraid of them. The framing that Katja Grace objects to is one of defecting, like in the classic prisoner's dilemma. Then are we, the AI safety community, defecting against the AI developer? And I am a bit puzzled on who has in practice used this framing, because the two quotes by Steve Burns and Eliezer Yudkowsky did not in fact use this framing. I'm sure someone has done that, but I just don't know who. And most AI researchers, in particular AI safety researchers, do in fact have a substantial probability of an existential catastrophe. So what the AI safety community is doing is cooperative according to them. So I think we should make a distinction here between the people who run the AI labs and the researchers. And the researchers may be just unfortunate pawns in the speed maximization, profit maximization of the AI labs. Here is one claim: AI researchers do not have a moral right to endanger the world. And I think this is in fact the central point, and one I wish Katja would highlight some more in her text. I think this is a really key essence of this debate. And also, I personally think that they do not have a legal right to endanger the world. This is probably more controversial. So Katja is claiming that caution, AI safety, is cooperating, and capability work is the one that's defecting by common sense morality. And so this narrative that we are defecting against them is a very destructive narrative. And here I must admit that, like, last session I had only read the first half of this article, and I was actually, based on that, I believe that Katja would take this in the other direction. She talked about her our lovely friends in AI, but Katja is in fact strongly on the side of the AI safety community, and I'm of course happy to see that. So who are we when you're writing an article like this? Probably not the United States, because, like, why would it have to be the United States just because you live there? I think there are in fact reasons why this is not a totally stupid framing. I think it can make sense, but Katja has a good point that other groups can do this. It is not a neglected area. The AI safety community has limited resources, and we should strongly consider not spending them on this kind of international politics. Also, in particular, if we assume that all countries adopt the same level of technological choice, technological restraint, then the level of countries simply doesn't matter very much. I think that's also a really good point. China is, of course, a really interesting place, because it may be, in fact, a great place to mitigate AI risk. And I agree with that. And my model is that it's the second place in a race that is most important, because if the second place slows down and acts cooperative, that gives the front runner far better opportunities for slowing down the name of safety. Unfortunately, I don't actually believe that China is particularly relevant. It seems to me like the Chinese AGI large language models are not number 2, but something like number 5 in the race, and for that reason they probably don't matter very much. Katja Gray suggests that we could communicate AI risk to researchers in China, and she says she has tried this and had some success. And I think that's really, really cool. Like, that is really the kind of initiative that it's initiatives like that we should expect to be really, really impactful, even if I'm not particularly optimistic about this one. How about the AI safety community? Are we the AI safety community? Katja has some discussion about, like, when you write an article, who are we? Are they like the authors, or the authors and the reader, or the wider community, or is it even something even wider than that? Like, there are people outside the AI safety community, and they of course will also die from AI risk, and they also have agency. So why are they not doing anything? Well, my thought on this is that if there in fact were communities outside of AI safety who were doing something, then the community would be extremely positive towards them. But it appears very much that the AI safety community is the only community, like the AI safety community, like Less Wrong, people who post on Less Wrong and EA forum and things like that, are basically all there is. Of course, there's also a number of auxiliary like subreddits and discords and things like that, but basically we're all there is. And one thing Katja points out is that we have some options within our community, but people outside may have some very different options. So one way we could try to affect change is to go through others. And I think it's good if it affords something, but I don't think we should expect that this will make the AI researchers less angry with us. Like, if they want to attack us, they will do it regardless of whether we try to, instead of attacking them directly, then go through the US government to attack them. They will see through this easily. Now the question, is this in fact tractable? And last time Katja had a large number of objections, and I said I would focus on 3 of them, and those are: we can't convince professors, and we have to convince a lot of people, and we may gain a bit of time, but we just die a few years later. And the third is the regulators are likely to be useless. So this is these are also the objections that Katja Grace focus on. So convincing people doesn't seem that hard. Like Katja has an argument here, maybe somewhat of a strawman, that the argument for AI risk is extremely sophisticated and only able to be appreciated by the most elite of intellectual elites. And I think in general the argument is actually really, really simple. Like, a lot of people have seen the movie Terminator 2, and that's of course not a strong argument, but it does show that there is in many people an understanding that, I guess, the overall idea that we are a group and there are another group, and this other group may have bad intentions, may want to kill us, may want to harm us. I think that is something that very, very many people understand. Like, I think the Neanderthal would understand the general concept that we have our tribe and then another tribe comes in and maybe they want to kill us. So the argument needs a lot of sophistication to be airtight, but the basic case seems really, really easy for people to grasp. Katja Grace says that she has experience trying to convince her Uber drivers on this, and she believes it is eminently possible. I think this is kind of a funny idea. I imagine that Katja Grace may be the person in the world who is best at arguing for these things and knows most about, like, how does the AI risk case work from a persuasion point of view and an outside point of view and these kind of things. So I'm not surprised that you can convince Uber drivers. Another thing you notice that the early thinkers in the field convinced many of AI risk, and they weren't really optimizing for convincingness, but still they managed to convince a lot of people. I think it was in fact because they were optimizing for something else. They were optimizing for truth seeking or something like that. And I think that was precisely why they were able to do this. Katja Grace arrogantly asserts that she believes she could do better if she optimized for convincing people. And this is what in the rationality community is sometimes called the dark arts of rationality. This kind of symmetric argument structure that works whether or not you are actually telling the truth. And the standard rationalist answer to Katja Grace would be, no, don't go into the dark arts. There's a reason we call them the dark arts. So more generally, my intuition is that convincing people the difficulty of convincing people is directly proportional to how relevant they are for the decision. So an Uber driver who never will have any influence anyway will be easy to convince, whereas like someone who is in charge of an AGI would be some of the most difficult people. So who should we convince? Katja obviously says we don't need to convince everyone, and that's true. And she notes that a lot of AI researchers are convinced already. And I want to push back a bit more on this, because I do believe that AI researchers are in fact not very relevant to this. Because how do you become an AI researcher at OpenAI? Well, you need to have two things. The first thing you need to have is you need to have like the IQ, the intelligence, so you are able to contribute. And the second thing you need to do is you need to be able to need to have a desire to work for OpenAI in spite of the idea that they may be trying to destroy the world. So I think that is why there is probably a lot of AI researchers that you can convince, and much fewer of those are working within OpenAI. Katja has the suggestion that we focus on convincing the leaders of the AGI labs, and as I said before, those are probably the most difficult people to convince. Back when the atheism was a big thing, then the argument was that it's impossible to convince someone of something if their paycheck depends on them not understanding that particular thing. And obviously, people who are leading AGI labs are strongly selected for believing that it's a good idea to run an AGI lab. And also, we have had, I would say, negative progress in the sense that I feel that Sam Altman probably started to care less about AGI safety after he the more he worked at OpenAI. I feel Demis Hassabis would also be an example of a person who have moved in literally the wrong direction. Dario Amodei, that remains to be seen. Katja Grace says that convincing the 10 most relevant AGI Labs leaders, that would lead to a decent slowdown. And of course, we've been trying this and we are at 0 out of 10 currently, so that seems hard. And also, we get a decent slowdown. That's not necessarily very much. And the last thing is that the structural issues that make people who worry about AGI not want to run AGI Labs, and people who don't worry about it want to run AGI Labs. These structural structural factors, they persist even if you remove the top 10. Second, the second argument was that, okay, we just die a couple of years later. What's the big point of this? So Katja wants to go deeper into an analysis of what happens if we spend a huge effort to buy a few years. And one thing that Katja unfortunately doesn't say is that one consequence is that we've spent a huge effort. And that means that we can't spend the same effort on alignment research. These two things may not funge against each other directly. Like, it's possible that we have some resources we can deploy towards convincing people and general buying time, and some resources we can put towards alignment research. And the second assumption here, the first assumption, if we're buying some time, is that AI safety efforts are being effectively pursued. And I think that is, in fact, the core assumption that does not hold. Like, I don't believe we're currently effectively pursuing AI safety efforts, and I think most alignment researchers would agree. Like, depending on precisely what you call effective, I think very few would use the word effective right now. Another thing that can happen if we buy time is geopolitics could change favorably. That's indeed true. I think if we want something like global coordination, we need like a really strong thaw in the relationship between the United States and China. And also, I don't actually believe that the United States and China is the relevant relationship. The public opinion could change in our favor. And that's something I think it's true. I think it's certainly something that could happen. And I think it is happening. And I think the public in general is very much on our side. I often feel like I'm too cynical about this kind of thing. I strongly believe that it will not have any kind of effect. But it is a thing that could happen, certainly. Other stuff could also happen if we buy some time. Katja doesn't elaborate. I'm going to elaborate a bit and say like some things that slow science in general. Like, we are obviously talking about things like global thermonuclear war or something like that. And that's totally a thing that could happen if we buy some time. We shouldn't call that a miracle, right? It's usually the things that slow down AGI also cause a huge amount of suffering. But it is a thing that could happen. Another thing that could happen if we are in fact successful to halt AGI is that it would be permanent, and then we would never go to space, etc. And Katja says he doesn't really understand this argument, so she won't argue against it. I think I don't much agree with the argument either, but I think the key part of it is that the maximum utility we could obtain in this universe depends strongly on our ability to have AGI. And if we don't have AGI, then the upper bound of what we can reach is probably like at least 1 million times lower. And then like things like lock-in are totally things that could happen, or like we've seen it in fictional evidence from Dune's Butlerian Jihad. Authoritarian lock-in is also a thing that has been hypothesized. I don't actually think this is a strong argument, and I don't think Katja does either. Here's an interesting argument. Obstruction doesn't need discernment. Like a common thought when we ask, will regulators be useless? That is indeed a thing that they could make the wrong regulations, and partly motivated by the people calling for the wrong, distracting regulations. Things like bias, technological unemployment. There are a number of things that people care a lot about that doesn't really strongly relate to AI safety. But that's actually generally fine, because if we stop AI or obstruct AGI research for reasons of technological unemployment, well, that's actually fine, right? Then we got it stopped. I think, unfortunately, this is very much not in the cards. Like it is true that if we can say something like halt all AGI research, then that would indeed solve the problem, and it would also solve the problem of technological unemployment and bias, etc. if we just stop doing AI totally, right? But that's not something that is inside the Overton window. We're not going to get anything that large. So the only regulations that are politically possible are ones that directly relate to AI safety, like building safe AI. And like, if the regulators ask us, like, how do you build safe AI right now, then our answer is, we have no clue. And that's why I feel that regulators are likely to be worthless. But in general, like, destruction is easier than creation. So no matter what kind of regulations we have, it will slow it down. Carl Schurman also says that the problem is a lack of buy-in. We can't get small asks, and then how are we going to get a larger ask? But I think, in fact, this argument does carry slightly, because Anthropic, they're working on, like, how do you build AI that have the right pronouns and doesn't assume that just because someone is like a boss in a company, it must be a man, and things like that. And I think this kind of work actually distracts them from trying to destroy the world as fast as possible. So it is something, but I don't think it stops them very much. But I also don't think it's nothing. Safety from speed, cloud from complicity. You may remember the speed argument, that it may be in fact faster to go, safer to go fast. And there was a list of possible reasons last time. I didn't go through them in much detail. Both I don't care much for the argument, and Katja doesn't care much for the argument. But she has a new argument that the room where AGI happens may afford good options for a person who cares about safety. So this is the kind of argument that Ilya Yudkowsky warned about like 20 years ago or something like that. Like, you are running on corrupted hardware. You are, like, this desire to be in the room is something that is built into humans, and we are hardwired to over-update on this argument. Another example of the moral argument against this is C.S. Lewis's The Inner Ring, which also says this is an argument that you should be very worried about making from a moral point of view. And Katja also agrees, says she is particularly skeptical about this argument. All I can say is I'm actually happy that Katja is using the word complicity. As far as I know, complicity is only something you use like when you're talking about crimes and things like that. Moods and philosophies, heuristics and attitudes. The first heuristic attitude is that technological choice is not ludism. And I think I would in fact go even further on that. I would state some kind of techno-optimism. The only two technologies that I'm against is AGI and gain-of-function research. We could try to flesh out and improve some of the good things that can happen without AGI. Because if all the good things come from AGI, that's kind of a strong argument. In particular, longevity research could be interesting. Like we could imagine the leader of an AGI lab who doesn't want to die personally and believes that AGI is his only chance of survival. And if we just accelerate longevity research, then he may not need AGI, and that could cause him to slow down. The third attitude is that we should deploy robust priors instead of specific galaxy-brained models on how to solve this problem. And like I dislike this framing because our models, the models that we are using, our arguments, they are simple and robust and elegant and perfect, and the arguments that they are using are like stupid and ill-considered. They haven't really thought things through. And the idea that you should choose the good arguments and not the bad arguments is kind of, all arguments look like that, right? Obviously, we think we have the good arguments, but like Sam Altman probably believes that he has the good arguments. And finally, the Teams mindset, I don't know how to pronounce that, it's this sheepdog that cannot do anything, basically. This can't do attitude. And I think we should avoid the can't do attitude, but I also think we shouldn't like victim blame. There's a framing that cancer patients should just fight, and sometimes fighting is just impossible. And like the blame is on the cancer. It's the cancer that's bad. It's not a personal failure of the cancer patient who is incapable of like resisting, incapable of fighting. I think that is a problematic framing. Like Miri has this statement like, we have given up hope, but we've not given up the fight. And I think that is a good mindset. It seems to be like the opposite of this Teams mindset. That is all for today. Thank you and see you next time.